Alrighty, so for our second item in our second week, I'm going to go over the work that you need to do. So as normal, and you're probably getting used to this, it's a lecture, a hands-on, and a current topic. Now this is also the week where I'm rotating out the lynda.com stuff that you may have heard me talk about at the beginning of the semester. And when you were doing your About 82, I had mentioned it because it was from a prior semester, but I have now no longer use it. So this is the last week that I needed to redo some content. Okay, so what I've done this week for the lecture is something that I think can be a little overwhelming, but also can be really helpful. And what this is, and I'm going to actually go to the website itself and just show you, or to YouTube itself. So the Travesty Media, who we're going to hear from in some of our future weeks, because I really think he does some of the best work, best quality stuff on this topic. But he's given a practical guide. Now, there's going to be a lot of information here. Remember, this is where you're taking notes, using your markdown, creating a file out there, just going over the content. It is 41 minutes. And really know that you will most likely hear some terms you have not heard, right? And if you have heard them all, good for you. Means you've been around this topic a little while. So the idea, though, is not for you to know what each of these things are. It's more that you get introduced to them. You have at least a broad knowledge of how they sit in the form of the larger industry, right? So, I'm just going to forward just a little bit, right? So Bootstrap, which we are going to use, and he talks about other frameworks. We're actually going to have a future item about that. He talks about, Git, which we are already using, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about it today because one of our items is going to cover that. Right, and I'm just kind of bouncing through. These three frameworks, Angular, Vue, and React, is actually a class I'm teaching for the first time next semester that just covers these three. So if you want to know more about that, I'll tell you. Server side, so Node.js, PHP, Python, C++, Go. Right now, Todd McLeod is teaching a Go class on Wednesday nights down at Bitwise for us. So So again, don't feel like you got to know it all. Just get introduced to these concepts and understand how they, where they set in the overall scheme of things. Okay, so that's, and I even tell you here what the name of the file I want, webdevguide.md, put that in your lecture folder, and then just give me a link to the lecture directory, okay? You can give me a link to the specific file, that's fine as well. Okay, so that's the first item. The second item is actually GitHub pages. So what we've been doing so far is you've been using GitHub both, and you've been using it inside of our GitHub organization, right? You all have, at this point, repos that you've created, both private and public ones that are out on our organization, our CIT82 organization, right? So now we're going to actually create one more, but this one's going to be a little different because this one is not going to be within our organization. And the way you name it is going to be important because the way you name it is going to indicate to GitHub that it is going to be a website, a fully functioning website. And this is what you will end up using for our project for this course. Okay? So I just want you to understand that concept. And the other thing I want to say, and this is just, and you'll hear me say this a couple of times, is that for this class, CIT82, we are in the very beginning weeks of this class using GitHub and not using the local Git system, okay? But we will, in the coming weeks, actually take what the work that you've done out on GitHub, and we'll do what's called cloning, or creating these repos locally. that allows us to connect them. But I say this because this can be a point of a little confusion for students because they get used to, and get in that case is out of context for, well, it's just different Git. They are used to the interface with GitHub. And then once we move to having a local repo, they sometimes have made changes out to the web. And because, and this is really what I want you to know, what we're doing here is version control. Because version control is tracking everything we do. If after we clone in a couple of weeks, you make changes out on GitHub, it throws off your local Git repositories because they are connected in the sense that we sync them up. And you'll see this when we go push. So no, it's okay if you don't get all this. And I know there are a couple of you taking CIT93 JavaScript at the same time you're taking this class. And for those taking 93 and 82 at the same time, just know it wasn't necessarily the way we intended it, but I understand why, because it's how we're offering them. But in 93, you have GitHub as your first assignment. For this class, sorry, you have Git and GitHub, meaning the local part where you clone. But it's okay, whichever way it works. Okay, so here's what you do. So here's what we're going to do. In your login, and I'm logged in with my student account, right? I'm not in the course repo, and I can tell that by just looking, right? So I'm just logged into GitHub, and I'm going to do, and I can just show you if I click on the little cat for GitHub, this shows me I'm at the beginning. So if I hit new here, and this also shows me, right? So in this case, you need to be in your username. And what this is your public facing, which by the way, your public repos within our GitHub are also public facing, but we'll leave that for another day. So really important what you name it here. You take whatever your username is, you add .github.io, okay? And this is GitHub pages. Okay, and you have to leave it public. That's just the way it is. You can initialize a README file. That's totally fine. We'll talk about a git ignore later. So here's the deal. Whatever your username is, it turns out to be the first part of your repo name, but you have to add this .github.io. So this is going to be your URL for your website that will become your project for this class. So now you hit create, and then it creates that repo. And in this case, there's nothing in there but a README file. Okay, so I'm going to show you something because I'm going to show you why it doesn't work yet and how to fix it. So if I was to just copy this, open in a new tab, and paste it, right? It's actually going to render, oh, look at that. It actually renders the README file. I love it when it actually makes me look like I'm not saying it right. Totally fine. So what's it rendering? It's rendering this README file. So GitHub is set up to do that. But really what we want is we're going to create a new file. And the new file, and I went ahead and hit create, is going to be called index.html. It's really important that you do lowercase .html here. That's an important part of doing this. And so we're just going to do a little bit of content just so you have this, and you'll be introduced to these codes if you haven't already, right? My page, you can put any kind of content here. Frankly, it does not matter, okay? Really more than anything, and I could put a paragraph, and actually I'm used to my VS Code editor, which you're going to learn about, to actually make this better, right? Some content here, right? And right now, if you've never done any HTML, these tags that I'm doing are wrapping this content in a H1 and a P, stuff you're going to learn about. And then I'm going to, and really, here's the other thing you can do. So I can copy that and then just come up here and do H2, right? My page, my second header. I just want you to play around, right? The idea is for you just to get some experience. So now what I'm going to do a little something, right? Play around a little more than I have here. Now what happens is this actually is set up already to give a what we call a commit message, and you can add more content, but for this particular one, you can just go ahead and hit commit. Okay, we'll commit this in. So if I move over to this and I hit refresh, it may take it a minute because sometimes the renderer, and because we're hosting out on GitHub, it can take a few moments for it to render. So let's see. Yeah, it's just going to take a few minutes, and I might end up having to clear the cache out as well, right? So it's actually capturing, if you don't know about this, it's actually caching my local. So let's actually come back over here just to make sure the file's there. Index, cool, should be fine. I'm wondering, oh, there it is. See, get impatient. So now, still going to this URL, but now it's rendering the HTML that I put in there, okay? So for this work, what you'll end up doing is after you set up your URL and put a little HTML in there, right? Then you just want to, right? And then I even talk about in here, right? What's a website or app idea you've been considering creating, right? And then 150 words, I didn't require replies here. So just put in, right? So if you don't know how to put a link, right? We could do it this way. I could actually just paste this. Oh, wrong one. Come over here. Now, what's important is to provide the link this way. You don't provide it from your GitHub repos, because what you're doing is you're telling the web browser you're using, when you go to this URL, it will find it on GitHub. So if you don't, you just need to provide it correctly, right? So it should look like this. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to paste that. Now, actually notice, and if you haven't been in the HTML editor, looks like it is actually already doing it for me automatically. The one thing I do like to add is at the end, I like to add open quote underscore blank. And what that allows it, what it forces it to do, which I think Canvas does by its own, and you'll have some writing here. Okay. I believe what it will do is actually go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and post that just to see it. Right. So you'll have some writing, and this little icon here indicates it's an external file. Canvas has been adding that automatically for us, but in this case, just make sure by having it, it opens in a new tab. That way this page doesn't get replaced with that, opening it in the current one. Okay, important, make sure you get that process the way I've shown it, and you will be in a good position. So the last thing you're going to do for this week, for this item, is actually the HTTPS, the secured HTTP. Right? So in this case, I'm going to have you watch this relatively short 10-minute video. And then I want you to choose, because they talk about a lot of different topics in this short series, but choose a topic, do some additional research, right? And then write about that. So find a topic that you find interesting, go research it, give us some links to some additional articles or videos that you found that help you understand that topic even deeper. And in this case, besides your post, you do need to do replies. So on the other one, I didn't require them because it was a hands-on concept, but on this one, I do. Okay, so I hope that gives you what you need. If you need anything else, please let me know. Otherwise, have a great one, and I'll talk to you soon.